Welcome to Bicester. We're at the June Scramblers assembly, and we have a special meeting of 9 Caterham 21s, which is a pretty amazing total considering that only 48 or so were built and only about 13 are on the road at any one time in the UK. I'm honoured to be joined today by Jez Coates, who was Technical Director of Caterham at the time of the 21 was conceived and engineered and developed and launched, and right the way through to the end of its production. I consider it to be the best car they've ever made, and hopefully Jez is sort of proud of his achievements. So Jez, can you just tell us the story? The car was designed by Ian Robertson, right? So
yes.
who had a full-time job. He was a qualified designer, wasn't he? But he
Yes.
was working as a journalist at the time. Is that right?
Yes, so Ian qualified at the Royal College of Art in London, which is where a huge number of motor industry designers train. People like Peter Stevens, who did the McLaren F1, Horbury, who was at Volvo for a long period of time. So Ian's got impeccable credentials in terms of doing the design work. So he was working at Autocar, he was their illustrator. So in a pre-digital age, Autocar used to have scoops of new cars coming along, and Ian would do a rendering.
A rendering of what he thought they would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So very talented, obviously, and if you go back to the 1980s, there'll be probably 100 of those renderings that he did for Autocar. For a brief period of time, he worked for us in sales, so he became an in-house resource.
Full time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After he left Autocar, if my memory serves me correctly. And then we schemed the idea of doing the 21 in terms of trying to broaden the appeal of the Caterham and trying to do a grown-up car.
Yeah.
So sort of the background of that was I joined the company in 1983 as an office lackey, 14th member of the team.
Wow.
Management's dog's body. And I did sexy things. I remember counting wheels and tyres in the cellars amongst the rats and putting long cockpit carpets on the shelf, because I joined right at the point where the long cockpit chassis was introduced. Anyway, over a period of time, we got more comfortable with being able to just keep the 7 in production. 83 was 10 years after Caterham had bought the rights.
Yep.
And there was Clive Roberts, who was there before me, had started to move the company on in terms of, rather than just purchasing parts and building the same car, it became apparent over a period of a year that it would need to be re-engineered to keep it in production. So Clive started that process, and I carried it on. And it was a bit like being a kid in a sweet shop in a way, in that after Clive moved on to Lotus, I had control over the engineering of a car. So I used to do my day job, which was keeping everything going in terms of the manufacture of the vehicle. So I was very sort of devoted to, we've got to get the cars out the door because that's how we earn money. But it also occurred to me that there was plenty of opportunities to improve the car, which I tended to do in the evenings with a colleague called Reg Price, who's sadly passed away now, and other members of the team. So between 83 and the mid-90s, we moved into a situation where we weren't just keeping the car in production, we were making improvements to the vehicle, and things like the JPE came along. And of course it was just fantastic fun, you know, as I say, kid in a sweet shop. And that progression, it's a very long-winded answer, I'm sorry, led to the fact that by the mid-90s, we felt we had the capability to do a new car.
Yeah.
And there's always concern from Graham Nairn that the vehicle was going to be legislated out of existence, the 7. And so the 21 would have given more side, it does give more side impact protection, etc. And it doesn't look quite so vintage.
Yes.
So for all of those reasons.
So it was kind of trying to ensure the future of the company in a way, And of course, in those early days, the intention was to make them out of aluminium, right? Graham's dream was to make an aluminium car, or was that just a prototype?
Yes, I had a fairly free rein, but certainly the first car, which was bodied by Roaches, it was Graham's idea to do it in aluminium. And of course that car is absolutely fantastic, and the process of making it was a dream. Those guys down there had just restored a load of auto unions
Right.
for Audi. Very, very talented, skilled people.
Still doing that.
Yeah,
I mean,
still doing
that
yeah.
same work.
Yeah. So just beautiful, and they built an aluminium body for their own 21.
Yes, which they still have.
Yeah, so there's two with aluminium bodies, and so it's really my fault that we didn't persist with the aluminium. Graham had a lot of faith in me, although he would never say it out front, in terms of the fact that I would do engineering, but it was also always commercially viable.
Yes.
So most of the things we did on the 7, you would get.
You could sell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
payback,
right.
payback within a year.
Right.
Absolute maximum.
Right.
The 21 broke that rule. So I mean, he was commercially very savvy. He wanted the company to make money. So whilst I was saying things like, well, if we do this, we do a new set of wheels, you know, we can sell them at a £500 premium. The actual cost to us is 80 quid. So the tooling, you know, which is tens of thousands of pounds, is going to be paid for when we sell the 30-second set. You know, I'm absolutely convinced we're going to be able to sell these. So he would go with that all of the time. And it's my fault that more aluminium cars weren't built, because I just couldn't conceive of selling a Caterham for sort of 80, 90, £100,000,
yeah, right.
which
as
is
a,
what
as an
the
item
aluminium.
like a piece of jewellery rather than a car. Yeah.
And of course, we're talking getting on for 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's a lack of vision on my behalf, and it's probably easier to be critical of me now because the whole world has moved on in terms of appreciation of craftsman built things.
Yes.
I mean, where we are sitting today is the embodiment of how the industry has evolved, you know, and you know, a Mark I Cortina, which in 1968 was just not collectible.
Yes.
A tidy one is now worth £6,000, £7,000, £8,000. So the landscape has changed. So that's my defence.
Yeah.
I just
I
couldn't
don't think
see.
you need a defence. I think from the owner's point of view, you achieved everything that you were set out to achieve. I think it's easily the best Caterham, and you know the fact that you know it's a practical car that you can fit a decent amount of luggage in. You can talk to your passenger at 80 miles an hour without raising your voice or wearing a headset. I think it handles like a heavy 7. It's fantastic. But the difficulty, obviously, you launched it in '94 to celebrate 21 years of making the 7. But it took a long time to get into production. I just wondered, with the new electric Caterham now on the horizon, and they're talking about this, we're seeing glimmers of what it might look like. What's it like for a small company like Caterham to put a totally new model, or not even a totally new model, but a radically new model, into production in a series production way?
Yeah,
how complicated?
It was a difficult process. So I used to always quote Clint Eastwood, I think, from Dirty Harry, and say to people, a man's got to know his limitations. So when we did the 21, I put a stake in the ground and said, it has to be based on the 7. So we discussed it with Arch, and it ended up with a bespoke chassis jig. But that's a fairly minimal cost. And then the rest of the car, in terms of its mechanical layout, is absolutely a 7. So that gives you a massive building block.
Sure.
Remember, as a company, in '83, we were just trying to keep the vehicle in production. So 10 years on to be doing a whole new vehicle when actually we're a cottage industry, very much like the type of businesses that are on this park, was a big step. So I had the presence of mind to say that we should base it very heavily on the 7 to give us a massive leg up. And then yet, even having done that, we made some fundamental mistakes. So Ian and I got completely romanced by the styling exercise of the thing, which is fairly well documented, which was done in my barn at home with polystyrene, which was just an absolute joy to do, completely led by Ian. But you know, I sort of critiqued it, and I did quite a lot of the interior. The interior is my thing because I love the symmetry of Corvette.
Yeah.
So that's what it's modelled on. But all of the organic shape in the door and things like that, you know, I'll make a statement there and say that's the most interesting
Yes.
door inner
Yes.
in the world.
Yes.
You know, you could argue.
Yes.
Fantastic, isn't it? But of course, we got us so up our own backsides that you can't drop the bloody glass in the door, can you?
Yes.
So you say it's the most practical 7 ever. I mean, that's a monumental error on our behalf to get romanced and go down the rabbit hole of building the thing to look and
look
sculpting
good
it,
and then
sculpting
realise-
it right
yes.
from the dashboard into
Yes.
the door. You know,
Yes.
all of that. I still look at that. And
But to someone like me, I never take the glass out, and I never need to. You know, but I know it put a lot of people off the car,
Yeah,
particularly
no,
when the leaves was out.
yeah, and when you need to pay a toll or something. You
Yes.
know. Anyway, so we started from a good place, base it on the 7. We got romanced in the actual exercise of doing it because it was just like fantastic fun, you know. Ian used to turn up at my house, and we'd get the wire brushes out, and we'd be modelling the polystyrene. We bought wardrobe-sized pieces of polystyrene, built them onto a 7 chassis. There's pictures in the books, and it's a bit, you know, it's like that Leonardo thing where you go and see the prisoners in the Accademia in Florence,
Yes.
where you walk around the back of those and it's just a block of marble.
Yeah.
You walk around the front and there's a
beautifully-
prisoner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we started from exactly that point. I mean, it's a bit romantic, I suppose, but yeah, it was a fantastic time and a great thing. But we didn't get all of it right, you know, and that's one of the things that we didn't get right. And actually, ingress into the car because of the wide sill, we kept the width of the chassis from the 7, is arguably more difficult than the 7 because you've got to step over that wide sill. So the sales team struggled to sell it. We'd gone off in a widgety engineering way, inventing this thing, having a great time, but we didn't bring the sales department with us. So we ended up in a situation where we presented the car to the sales department, say, this is fantastic, we've done this, go and sell it.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, we've had no input into this.
Yes.
So, you know, so departmentally there was some friction, you know, and there's people saying, well, we can't sell it. It's worse to get in than the 7. There's no bloody windows, you know.
Yeah.
And so it became a more difficult sell for them. It was difficult to manufacture. It's a massive step for us, you know. We started, I chose very carefully who we were going to use for the bodywork, and the guy who did the rocket for Gordon Murray did it. Very experienced.
Beautiful job. Honestly,
Yeah.
these cars, we've got 9 cars here. They're all 25 years old or more, and there's no crazing or starring on the fiberglass at all, even though it's so light.
Yeah.
They did an amazing job.
Yeah, fantastic job. And he said you don't want as few shut lines as possible, so 2 doors, a bonnet, a boot, and a body. So we did that. But by the time we finished, there's over 100 mouldings.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have all the interior and the dashboard and all of that. And so the cost of doing it, because the aluminium car was massively asymmetric.
Yes.
So when we took a plaster of Paris mould off the aluminium car, which probably most people know, we used that to make a body buck, and we spent months honing that.
Yes.
And the thinking behind that was that once you've actually made the mould tools, which are quite expensive, if you've got errors in them, then that error is in every car. And so we spent a lot of time, like 6 months, honing the design. And actually I think that the glass fibre body is significantly more beautiful than the aluminium body.
Oh, really? Okay.
In terms of the way the surfaces are developed.
Yes.
You know, the concave nature, the shape around the headlamps and
The
all
little
of that.
spoiler at the back, the spoiler.
All of those things, which
that the aluminium car didn't have.
Yeah, that the aluminium car didn't have. And of course, if we'd left Roaches to it for 6 months, they'd have done it. It's no criticism of Roaches.
No, sure, yeah.
We were on a deadline to get the car to a show.
Yeah.
But getting the balance between stopping and getting it as beautiful and as symmetrical as possible and as practical, because of course we had to develop the door inners, the door shut lines, how the doors open so they didn't collide with the bonnet.
It's incredibly complicated,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
a massive amount
The
of work
relationship
in,
between engineering and design and marketing is
Yeah.
incredibly complicated. To end up with something that is both functional and sellable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got some things wrong. That time cost a lot of money. So by the time we'd finished that, we were like, I don't know, 400,000 in, I think, which is a lot of money
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
So this project wasn't like anything else I delivered for Graham. So he's starting to get nervous about it. The build time in the factory is significantly longer because it's a much more complicated thing.
Sure.
Even though we decided that we received a chassis body unit for the 7 from Arch, and with the 21 we would really receive a chassis body unit
And
from Rawson's.
You put the body on. Oh,
No,
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 they
no.
put the body. So
No,
the Arch did the chassis.
Went
delivered
to
it
Rawson's.
and they
Rawson's
put-
bolted it all
I
together.
see, I see.
Rawson's hung the doors.
Okay.
So if their doors didn't fit in the aperture, they had to sort it
Right,
out. They
right.
hung everything. So it came to us, all panels fitted.
Wow. But
And
not painted or not painted?
not painted.
Not painted.
I think. No, I think they were painted. I think they were painted in Dover. So they came into us, and then the theory being that it was a similar build for us in the factory, fit engine,
Yes.
gearbox.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be much more disruptive. But the reality is that because it's not such a mature product as the 7, and because it's a more complicated product, the time to build was significantly longer. So, you know, how profitable was it? And eventually the company got cold feet. Sales and marketing were a bit cheesed off about the access and a bit cheesed off about the windows. We weren't making a lot of money out of it. There weren't massive sales because the Elise had arrived, which really queered the pitch for us a bit.
Yes.
And so we then went, well, why don't we try and address these things and do Caterham 25, 4 years on. That was going to be a bigger car. We had a deal with Vauxhall at the time, so we were looking at using a Vauxhall V6 engine. We were going to address the whole window malarkey completely, and that was because we were going to just transplant an MGF glass house.
Yeah.
Comes with windows that go up and down, manually or electrically, hood, all of that stuff. And we made it look quite pretty, but then again, I scuppered that because I've always had not just an engineering hat, I've also had a commercial hat. And I sat in meetings and said, look, if we do this, you know, we've got a massive amount of money to spend again, and we will be competing with Mercedes SL, which comes with a 60,000 mile warranty, 3-year warranty, and here we are, little old Caterham. We're going to have to sell it for 50, 60 grand.
Yeah.
So all customer expectations go
Yeah.
up. You know, it's just too difficult for us to do.
It's going to be very interesting to see where the new Caterham goes with this electric thing, isn't it? Because they're in a very similar situation, trying to produce something that's going to be head to head with the big guys,
Yeah.
who really know their way around now around electric power plants.
Yeah.
And Caterham's still minute in comparison. It's going to be another big challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I understand what they're doing. They're working with Swindon, who are an available partner because they're a low volume partner and a past partner of the company. We used to work closely with Swindon with tuned engines of the Vauxhall VX engine, culminating in the JPE, which is an iconic model. But I would be more comfortable if they'd managed to partner with some sort of manufacturer. And that may not be possible.
No, quite.
So
'Cause
it's
they're
no
guarding their
criticism.
IP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think they're beginning to get into it at about the right time. I might be even tempted to
Oh, good.
wait a little bit longer, because over the next 7 years, let's say they've got to have something for 2030. I know there's talk about derogation and all of that. The problem with the derogation is, if none of the major engine manufacturers are still making engines
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
and helping you with homologation,
Yeah.
extending the deadline doesn't massively help.
Yeah.
You know, if you can buy a load, they can't buy Sigma anymore, sort of Ford have pulled the rug from on that.
Yeah.
Duratec is a very aged engine now, by today's standards, so that could be a problem.
Yes.
Anyway, I think if you think how far we've come in 7 years since 2016, if you bake in the electrical components, battery management system, electric drivetrain now, the world will probably have moved on by 2030
Yeah.
in terms of what's available.
So actually, it is very analogous, isn't it, to the situation you were in sort of '94, when nobody knew the Elise was coming, and you know that things were going to take a step change with internal combustion. Now, it's the same decision process they've got to make, isn't it, with this electric car? When do you put your toe in the water? When is it too late? When's it too early?
Yeah.
It must be a heck of a
Yeah.
a risk, even though they're now effectively a much bigger company.
Yeah, I think it's good to make a start now. Whether what they're doing with Swindon makes it to production, I don't know, but they need to get on the learning curve
and start doing something.
with
Yeah.
regard to
Yeah.
all of that.
Well, look.
I think a very interesting time for them. Great to see that they've got new premises. I remember moving us into our glamorous premises in 1987, which was glamorous. I mean, I use the word advisedly because we were operating out of a selection of tin shacks around the back of an Esso filling station
Right,
on Caterham
right,
Hill.
yeah.
And the '87 storm came and blew the roof off it.
Oh, did it?
So there was almost nothing left.
Oh
So
my goodness.
we always thought Graham was very lucky. He was often referred to internally as golden balls, and he'd done the deal on the premises in Kennet Road, and you know, coinciding with that, the old premises evaporated overnight.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, look, Jez, thank you very much for this, and thanks for coming, and thanks for the 21. And I think all the owners here are very grateful that you did it at all. So,
yeah, no, I'm still very proud of it.
fantastic.
Very proud of it.
Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.